I actually worked for one of the main banks just after uni. There was this really strong association between real estate and the most successful people that were in our client book at the bank.
You said that you were leaving your own property and going rent vesting.
Turns out buying your own home slows you down as an investor.
And we have to accept that when we own things, they own us in return.
I heard the most amazing quote yesterday: there is no traffic on the extra mile. Either you get on with it and you do the hard, uncomfortable stuff, and at least you have a shot at getting that result, rather than sit there and just say you can't achieve it.
The property investor that has ended up going rent vesting is back in the studio. It is good to see you, Elsa. It has been some time.
Has been. Thanks, Luke. Great to be back. Over a year, I think. A lot has changed, I'm sure, for both of us and everyone listening.
Yeah, and the property market just seems so stagnant. I was saying to Mikey earlier this morning before we come in here to record ourselves, this feels like the quietest or least bullish property people have been for some time. Like even the YouTube videos that I watch and stuff, the comments are minimal. There's constant articles about how the market's tight. It doesn't seem like there's any FOMO out there. There's extra listings. We're going into winter. So, what are you seeing out there? Because you're actually on the ground. I'm just reading articles. I've got minimal exposure to property, whereas you're out there dealing in this space every week.
Yeah, it's a really unusual time, and the dynamics, value-wise, rental demand-wise, is a time I've not seen before. I've been investing for nearly 2 decades. And when I speak to property managers out there who have been similar or longer, we all agree we've never seen this set of dynamics before. So I agree with you. There's a bit of a dichotomy. I think there is sort of the smart money, the investors, the professional investors are extremely active and very competitive, actually. Yeah. But then with the media out there and the lack of growth, your typical investor or mum and dad investor does not have the confidence. I think we've come from a market where in the last 4 or 5 years, the emphasis has been on property investment creates wealth. Yeah. Largely led by a lot of government messaging, let's go for new builds, let's get the growth and the supply up, which has been awesome. But with the new measures in place, especially debt to income, and with the property market coming back, especially in Auckland, 20% or so, a lot of investors are eager to move, but actually can't, financially cannot, because of the DTI already tied up in assets that they own, but are worth less. Yeah, so it's a bit stagnant.
Yeah, because then I read the data and I actually have a look and I see that investors are actually, they are very active, and their percentage of the debt amount might not be growing astronomically, but they're taking a volume of debt compared to periods where they knew that there was going to be interest deductibility and things like that. So I think the thing that I've seen too is that some, let's use the terminology like mum and dad investors, so baby boomers who have rentals, questioning whether this is what they thought it was going to be. There's no capital growth, so then it's lacking excitement, and then rates are going up, insurances are going up. You might have a tenant move and go to Australia, then you've got to fill it. You've got 3 weeks where you're not getting rent, and they're questioning, is this worth it anymore?
Definitely, and I think particularly with the boomer group, right? A lot of them were looking to retire around from COVID, 2020 up until now and ongoing. But I'm hearing on a weekly basis, couples or parents of more my core client, my core client would normally be around 30 to 40 years old, either pre-kids or, starting a family. And then I also have the subset of clients who are in that sort of 55 to 65-year-old bracket, who either their kids are the catalyst, educating them and saying, Mum and Dad, you've got to sort out your retirement, or they are pre-retirees who have actually worked out that what they're going to get is not going to work and they need to do something extra now. But alongside that, you've got these, I know of 70-year-olds who had hung their hat on what they would grow wealth-wise through property over the last 10 years. Largely that's been unwound since COVID. And there are some really sad stories where, 70, 75-year-old couples with over $1 million of debt on their own home, how the heck are they going to clear that and retire?
Yeah, it's scary. I feel like there's a big wave coming where I had my mum on the pod the other day.
Awesome.
We were talking about how I think millennials are ignoring what situation financially their parents are in and what they've got ahead of them and the average age expectancy, the cost of health and whatnot. And parents are ignoring that too because they think it's too late. And we're going to have this coming wave of waking up for younger people going, shit, I'm not only just worried about my own financial situation, but now I'm feeling pressure about what do I do with my parents. And there's already an undertone of this, but I think there's going to be a lot of that. And what Mum and I were talking about too is that she's mortgage-free, owner-occupied, but she's like, I want to live my life, but all of my wealth is tied up in here.
Yeah.
And so the goal of, okay, get mortgage free is amazing, but then like, now what? And it's very scary, you know,
Totally.
we're going to see a big wave of it.
See, what's interesting, right, is that their generation and the mentality around property, it was all about spend your career paying off your home, your own occupied residence, right? And then when the kids leave, you retire, you move down, you downgrade into a smaller, supposedly more affordable, you know, we're from Taranaki, right? These duplexes that are everywhere, 2-bedroom units. You know, you buy one of those, it should be a third to 40% of the value of the larger family home you're selling down. But that's not the case, because if you want to retire into anything even half the size, it's probably a Ryman or a Bupa type property that's more expensive than your old family home at that point. One of the valuers in Taranaki I caught up with a few weeks ago, he facilitated the most valuable land purchase, $11 million purchase on the northern side of New Plymouth for the current Ryman. It was like 175 retiree residences. They're all more expensive than the average New Plymouth house.
Really?
Yes. So how does that equate, right? You think you're downsizing, downgrading, but you're not releasing any capital to live off.
Well, we didn't even come here to talk about this, but we're very good at going on a tangent. But like on that as well, because what I've started doing, this is now like with the growth of Keep the Change and stuff, I'm like, I see these things and I have to go down a rabbit hole. So I've started reading investment books from New Zealand financial advisors that are baby boomers, trying to educate baby boomers of like, this is what you've got in front of you. And a big part of what they talk about is that the whole downsizing thing, what people then forget is in that period, now you go to downsize, but your kids have moved out of where you live as well. And you're like, well, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Or you go, right, I'm going to downsize, but then you go, well, actually, I want a brand new place and I want low maintenance and whatnot. And those things are now pricing in convenience and stuff. So it's then, do you move, down the country to a region, or maybe you thought, oh, we might move to Queenstown and Wanaka or somewhere, but those places are booming. So the whole thing seems to have been disrupted. And I think if people aren't thinking about it at that age, like, people need to be mindful of what their parents might be ignoring and what their actual plan is. And there's probably a high chance a lot of them don't actually have a plan. Yeah,
totally. And that's a conversation, if you're listening to this, and you should be the one leading them on that with everything you know. I think, I agree with you. And sort of culturally, for myself personally, that's always been part of Chinese culture, is you look after your parents, because in many of the Asian countries there is no pension, or very lack of. So that is actually one of the original motivations I had to invest from when I was 21 or so. I was terrified of, I think I got life insurance when I was 20. I just started worrying about this sorts of things.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't fully understand it. But that is the case for many cultures. And actually, I think I learnt from someone the other day, there are over 200 different cultures in Auckland alone. There will be a total continuum from those who are, right on that end thinking, okay, well, I'm working to pay for the day-to-day life of my parents already, and that will be just part and parcel of the expenses that they're accounting for.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And then there'll be down the other end those that actually think, oh, I'll sounds awful, but kind of banking on some inheritance. I'm not sure whether that's going to be a very good retirement plan.
100%. And I think a lot of us don't actually understand the cost of healthcare when people get older as well. And that could be where a lot of the wealth that younger people think they're going to inherit ends up being spent. So anyway, a lot to unpack in that space as well. But do you want to just give people a brief background, if they haven't listened to the podcast that we did a year or so ago, which they should definitely go back and check out to find out more about your journey? What is it that you're helping your clients with out there, and what does Wolfe Property Coaching do?
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Elsa Wolfe, founder of Wolfe Property Coaching, based here in Auckland, but largely, if you check out the stories every week or so in a different location, so all around the country, in the pursuit of helping my clients achieve similar property investment journeys and outcomes as I've built for myself over 20 years. So I have a $20 million portfolio that is exclusively, what I've kept has been exclusively from the methods I teach, which is basically a trademark process of buying existing build properties to manipulate the physical house, add a bedroom, really get the rental value up to achieve a positive cash flow, especially under the current conditions, as well as assess future land development potential and that sort of thing as well. So very much about accelerating your growth or your goals through property investment, whatever they may be, by taking an active approach and adding value in 5 or 6 weeks so that the next possibility or that next acquisition you're after can be brought forward and you can achieve your goals faster.
So from the outside looking in, because I'm not in the property space, from what I sort of pick up, you've got avenues where busy professionals could lean on you and your team for coaching around, okay, here's how to achieve, wealth generation in property, for instance, or why are you doing it, and then down to everyday, people who want to have a go themselves?
First and foremost, coaching. So like-minded Kiwis who are looking to better themselves and their families. And as I briefly mentioned before, I find there's a real value shift. When a couple gets together, they settle down, they're getting serious about life, post-overseas experience, and are starting to really plan for their future family. And not wanting to spend their entire life building that up, but actually boost that as quickly as possible. So that seems to be the person I attract. And it's about taking control and not purely working a 9 to 5. I think it's great to do this on top of, not instead of. Sometimes I think there's this expectation that if you're full-time in property or real estate, that then you're more successful, which I highly contest. I think this should be in conjunction with how you spend your best hourly.
Yeah.
So that this is advancing you faster for whatever your future goal is, rather than working, your full-time role. This should be an addition to speed up the outcomes for you and your family.
And your whole interest in this area started when you started renovating properties yourself, right?
Yes. I actually worked for one of the main banks just after uni in Waikato, and it was through analysing a whole bunch of different industry P&Ls, much as what you see, but on a small snapshot, and really seeing that there was this really strong association between real estate and the most successful people that were in our client book at the bank. And it was either that they owned a small business and were able to buy and invest in properties. I didn't even know what a rental property was when I was 22, and how that all worked compared to a home. Or the reverse was true. So there would be business people or aspiring business owners leveraging off their own home to begin a business. So in whichever direction, I could see there was a tie there. And one of my clients who owned an accounting firm at the time sat me down and ran me through the profit and loss and said, here's all these benefits from owning a rental property. At the time, I couldn't get my monthly paycheck to do one loop around the moon. So I was looking for something else. And that was honestly the biggest penny drop. So that with my 50 points discount as a staff member, I just jumped in. And to be honest with you, I didn't own my own home until property number 2, which was after I'd bought a Hamilton-based property and split that into 2. So that became a home and income. So I effectively had 2 rental properties before my boyfriend and I at the time bought a home for ourselves, and then actually repeated that same process again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hamilton-based, so you'll be supporting the Chiefs this weekend at the time of recording this?
I have clients in the Chiefs, so absolutely.
Oh, there we go. Okay. High, clientele of high echelon. And I guess 20 years ago, you would have been in that peak property tax rule zone being a geeky accountant where you could depreciate your property, you could offset a loss on your rental against your personal income as well, take the tax refund and put it back into repairing the property, not
Definitely.
adding any value, of course, and expensing the repair. And
Yeah.
it was a great, it's very different to what it is now.
It
and then
is.
we've almost gone full to the other end where there is no depreciation, there is no loss offset. You can carry losses forward, but you've got to keep it to property mostly. We've even got bright line rules, and then what's the final thing? Oh, interest deductibility came and then has been phased back out. But you've probably seen a massive change in rules around property.
Definitely. So I saw right from the excitement bubbling up 2007 pre-GFC, that's when I started to invest while I was at the bank. And then equally 2008 when the global financial crisis hit, saw the total tumble from everything from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rules are so different now. The first property that my boyfriend and I bought, I put $5,000 down as my contribution. That bought a property in Hamilton that ultimately kickstarted my entire portfolio. And all those great benefits that no longer exist, like the depreciation. I do remember those early years where you'd kind of rely upon that refund from IRD just to top up, get back to zero on the bank account.
Yeah.
No longer exists.
Yeah.
Too many of us signed up to a KiwiSaver plan without much thought. And signing up is great, but if you've never got advice before, you could be missing out. Your KiwiSaver account could become one of your biggest assets over your lifetime. That's why getting expert advice early and ensuring you're in the right fund is so worthwhile. Generate have a team of KiwiSaver advisors available to help. Head to generatekiwisaver.co.nz/change to book a no obligation meeting. They can even come to you. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
But from all of those stages and experiences, the regulatory changes have been for to build a better financial acumen with investors. So that's extremely positive. And I think that being in control of the items you can calculate as an investor going forward is becoming more and more essential. If you think about the 3 benefits of real estate and property investing, number 1, you have cash flow, right, through rents. So those rents should over time translate into passive income, so post-tax cash flow that, hey, if you want to retire and have that nice Ryman apartment, then that's what you want to pay for it, right? Number 2 is the capital growth. That's something that no individual investor can control whatsoever. That's beyond us. The rental market, the growth in property values, we can't control that. But capital growth translates into wealth over time. And then the third one is leverage, and that pulls those 2 together. So over the years and decades I've been investing, the properties that have always moved me forward to my next one sooner have been when I have added value very swiftly and always without having to go into these major extensions where I need council involvement. Every time I have, always do things the correct way. But every time I've had to involve the council, it's taken 5-6 times longer. It's cost 3-4 times more the fixed price quote that I had.
Yeah.
And then I've had to pull in so many third-party consultants that it's actually oftentimes neutralised the benefits that I thought I was going to get. So, over dozens of my own renovations and now hundreds with my clients, though it just reaffirms fast, retain control, try not to do anything structural unless you need to for consent, and keep building the portfolio within your set of controls that you have.
So that piece there, adding value, it's something that I bang on, with clients and outside of property. That's what the market ends up paying for, is how they see what it is that you're putting to the market, whether it's valuable. So when you talk about adding value, you're talking about you buy the price for X and you add value to it so that it sells for more than that, and you're not having to add in a whole heap of cost by layers of consultants, councils, slowing it down. That creates inefficiency, etc.
That's right. If you're sinking money into paperwork, right, that's not necessarily adding value to the property itself.
Yep.
My portfolio and my clients is completely by design. I think one of the most dangerous things you can have as a property investor is a rental property that's identical to next door or identical to another. There's value in differentiation. So there is not a single property within my portfolio that looks like another one. And that could be to sell on the real estate market, or it could be to rent on the rental market. The moment that your rent or your value could be controlled by the financial situation of your neighbouring owner, that's you relinquishing some control to an extent, right? If you have a neighbour who is under financial duress and they sell a property for less and yours looks the same, they're somewhat resetting the value and your outcomes, right? And also if they're desperate for cash flow, it might be vacant for a few weeks, they drop the cash flow. Well, that again is resetting the potential value of yours. So I think it's really important to add value in a way that is always appropriate for 2 things. So you're renovating to make sure that what you do is super relevant to the market, so the location, so suburb, street level. And then number 2, make sure that it's really appropriate to what that typical or most likely tenant in that spot is expecting. There's no point, we add bedrooms a lot, so internally these cosmetic bedrooms. In some places those bedrooms might come off a lounge, certain suburbs absolutely expected, normal, and then others absolutely not. No one wants a bedroom off a lounge.
So you've got to be able to go to these properties around the country and basically identify that's where the value is. And a property investor once said to me, you don't make money when you sell, you make it when you buy, right? And what that means in your profession, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because you can see where you could add value to it that somebody else can't see, and then someone will eventually pay for.
Yeah, that's right. So the method, I'm coaching the method of what I teach and what I've practiced for myself and for my clients. So it's about, put it this way, say you have 2 3-bedroom, 1-bath houses side by side, classic weatherboard, Kiwi home, you can find them everywhere. One of those can follow my system, one of them can't. So there are different factors I educate my clients to look for and understand how to calculate, and that's the physical way that the property looks, different characteristics of it, different layouts, different sizes, and certain factors make that property conducive to adding an internal bedroom. And why would we do that? Well, if we pay for 3 bedrooms but we get rent from 4, we're increasing the return, so ultimately pushing it towards a stronger cash flow. and every investor's worried about their debt to income, DTI. You know, the house that has the 4-bedroom income versus the one that has the 3, that 4-bedroom's going to nudge them along a little further with their goals.
Got you. And with all coaching, I would imagine you still have to do the work.
This is the thing. Things take time, you know, and especially now the property market is stagnant / going backwards. Rents are softer than I've ever seen before, what we briefly mentioned at the beginning. So vacancy, you know, we're having vacancies for the first time, even with my clients. Normally, our property managers are involved from day dot in due diligence. So normally they're pushing us out saying, hurry up, get rid of that jib dust, you know, let's get the tenant in. For the first time ever, we're seeing vacancies in between, which is more like the normal market. And you just have to be prepared as an investor, but especially adding value, that things take time. There's so much you can calculate, but you can't control the market. But hey, it is the long game, because it is taking time makes you that wealth and makes you the cash flow. We've just moved house 5 weeks ago. That was an 8-month search, you know. So if I'd given up after 1 month, yeah.
Well, we'll come to that as to why it might have taken you 8 months. But do you know the saying, like, it separates the wheat from the chaff or something like that? Is that what you're seeing out there at the moment? Because I get the sense with property that, you know, everybody thinks they're an expert when the market's going up, right? And I see it in business as well, where people are like, I'll say, you know, you should be doing email marketing. Oh, we don't need to do that, mate. And then, you know, the market will turn and they've got a big database and they won't actually utilize it. And you're like, you should have been doing that consistently. But it must be frustrating for some people out there who've kind of thought that, you know, anybody can get this right. But if the capital growth isn't there, it's completely different, right? The story is different.
That's right. I mean, there's capital growth that translates to wealth, as we said earlier. No individual has control over that. You know, that's that, you know, what are the words used in media? Speculation. So to an extent it is, right? You're hoping that based on historic growth rates of, you know, 7% or whatever it is, that over time you can calculate something similar, you know, but that's a bit of hopefulness, you know. And equally with rents, unlike with rents and cash flow, if you're adding bedrooms, if you're adding value to the rental market, you're then also adding value to the standard of properties. You're improving the standard. You're adding value and wealth in your own properties. Which one can you calculate and play a hand at? The latter, right? So the cash flow, by buying the right property that suits a method you want and suits your risk profile, you can create a much stronger cash flow. And that's the one that actually keeps you liquid, right? We use this word liquid. This is the one that keeps you paying the bills, keeping the lights on. Unlike the wealth, you know, that's for a future benefit. The one that actually impacts you right now is whether the rents on your investment properties are putting cash into your pocket or taking it out every month for the bank.
Yeah, I talk about this as income season versus asset season. And when we're in an asset season, assets are increasing in value and everybody thinks that they're kicking ass and life's a bit easier, right? Because just about anyone can make money. But I feel like we're in an income season and have been for some time. If we look at house prices are basically stagnant for 4 years. The NZX 50 is just trading sideways for the last 4 years. That to me is an income season where if you can't figure out how to add value and create income yourself, you're basically out of control of the asset season piece that's not there at the moment. And you get left further behind than those who are actually learning skills to be able to generate income, no matter the industry, whether it's property, shares, whether it is, you know, in your own career and things like that. If you miss an income season and, you know, you then wake up and realize you can get left behind those who go, oh, I understand we're in this season. I need to be good at adding value, because when you can add value in an income season, you know, imagine what you can do in an asset season.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because that's my intuition, but you've put it into expert words. I love it. No, I totally agree. Those who are out there trying to do better and upskill now are the ones who are buying the properties, adding value and progressing themselves. The ones that say, I've been looking for a month, oh, there's nothing to buy, it's so hard, will give up, and then again they self-perpetuate. Nothing does happen because they're not happening. I heard the most amazing quote yesterday, there is no traffic on the extra mile.
Wow, that's good.
How good is that?
Yeah.
I was like, that is so true, you know? So either you get on with it and you do the hard, uncomfortable stuff until you get the result, and at least you have a shot at getting that result, rather than sit there and just say you can't achieve it.
Yeah, nice.
That's the difference.
The other thing that's happened recently is you sort of threw the investor world into a little bit of a frenzy when I think you said that you were leaving your own owner-occupied property and going rent-vesting.
Turns out buying your own home slows you down as an investor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cut that out. Sheesh, that would be, so maybe unpack that for us. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, dare I say it, buying your first home before an investment property potentially could slow you down. with your investment goals.
But that's basically the reverse of what we're all taught. Like,
Yeah.
get on the property ladder, you'll be able to use that equity to then start investing. So, what are you warning people of here?
Well, I mean, leverage, right? That third benefit is it's very typical for Kiwis to want to get into their first home. Totally get that, right? The idea is that you dip into the equity in your home, that usable equity, to form a deposit. So say in our world, existing builds, you need 30% of that purchase from your home, leveraging that out. The issue that I'm starting to see with investors I'm speaking with is that certain banks' policies, owner-occupied, you can achieve 6 times debt to income in your own home, 7 in your investment properties. Even if you are taking out a deposit from your home for the purpose of a deposit on an investment property, some banks are still restricting that to the 6 times. So what's that doing? It's prematurely dropping the leverage that you're otherwise expecting to have. So even though that deposit is for the intent of an investment property and tagged by that for IRD purposes, right, tax purposes, some banks are actually restricting that because it's still on your own home. Gotcha. So your leverage is less than what you might be mentally calculating. And that could be the difference between you being able to buy that next investment property or not. Also, if we come back to the traditional definition of assets, like how would you define an asset?
Yeah, something that is, I think how most people would interpret it, is something that's increasing in value and that's producing a return.
Cash flow, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no cash flow off your own home unless you have borders, or maybe it's a home and income, like we produced in the first couple that I did. But I tell you what, having a home in Grey Lynn in central Auckland produces no cash flow while you're living in it, and that's a heavy outgoing.
And you've got repairs, you've got maintenance, you've got, which arguably the same thing, you've got rates, you've got insurance, you've got, the roof's gone, we need a contractor for this, that's, emergency call out on a weekend, etc.
I think our rates are around $450 a month. With our crazy weather events the last few years, EQC, all those provisions on insurance are hiking up. I think from the renewal process across my portfolio, insurance went up between 25 and 40% per property overnight. That's crazy. Imagine fast forward 30 years being on the pension and thinking that a pension would even cover insurance on the property you're living in. It probably won't.
Well, again, going back to the pod with Mum, when we off the mic, I said to her, what's the pension going up by? And now let's get your what your rates are going up by, and remembering that we need to do both in net terms, and basically rate increases nearly chewing up any increase in the pension.
Yeah, totally. And I just don't see how an average Kiwi, how can you live where you want to live if you don't have, at that point, passive income to pay for it? So that's, my personal goal through investing in real estate was always to have my income from rentals cover my expenses, So that achieved that a while ago, and I thought, well, just me being impatient all the time, faster. So, a goal that my husband and I have always had was to be on the beach, and we basically want and need to be in Auckland and want to be close to the airport for those future benefits of flying out whenever we want to.
Yeah.
And so Takapuna was where we really identified maybe 18 months ago that we started building a plan for. And again, these things take time. By the time we were in a position to start affording beachfront rent, the goal was to upgrade, get the sand between the toes of our kids, He laughs, but, I started to really have this issue of having this 500 square metre box in Grey Lynn with AstroTurf, which sounds cheeky to say, but I think as you have children, your values change. I'm from New Plymouth. I'm used to being barefooted on the cul-de-sac after school. Yeah. I want the mountain, I want the beach, I want nature, and I want that for them. And so, rents there are not cheap in Takapuna, and so that was a huge, lifestyle upgrade, but also expense, base to the expenses upgrade. And I would say we planned over about a year, and what has definitely supported has continuing to acquire properties while prices are lower, inverted commas, and as interest rates have been refixed on some of our blocks of units, we've managed to see that those pay for the rent of where we're now. So the value of the house we are renting in Takapuna is 6 times the value of our Grey Lynn home. We don't have AstroTurf, we have beachfront, and yet the rent we are paying is 20% of what it would cost if we had an interest-only mortgage and had bought the house we're in.
Wow.
So basically we've massively upgraded our lifestyle, but not for proportionate cost.
Yeah.
So
And because you're running a business from home, you'll be able to claim a portion of that rent as a home office expense.
absolutely. Do you know what? It took us 8 months. We only viewed 3 rentals to potentially move into, because if we think about the definition of a finite resource, that's basically Takapuna Beach, right? So we looked at 2. They didn't quite fit. The third one, which is where we live, has external doors on the bottom floor for various rooms, and one of those is now our tax-deductible office. Thank you, Lo.
Smart.
So, so it's great.
I saw you putting up content around this, and I was trying to work out where it was. I thought it might have been Milford, but Takapuna. All right, well, I'm coming around for a look. I want to see what this place is. Are you happy to say like what it's worth or what you'd have to pay for it?
So,
like
I mean, obviously.
The purchase price?
Yeah, exactly. So value-wise, along the little stretch that we're in is somewhere between 10 million and 13 million for these properties. Isn't that wild?
Well, the funny thing is, like, I used to, even when poor, I would walk Takapuna Beach and think, man, like that's been a bit of a goal for me longer term, is buying a beach house. And now, as you start inching closer and understanding things differently, I'm like, would I tie up 10 million in one of these, or would I be better to rent it, or just rent it when I want to rent it?
Yeah.
And even we were walking around further, myself and my partner recently, to Minnehaha.
Yeah.
And we were
gorgeous.
looking at one of the places, and I said, should we just go and stay there for a weekend to see what that's actually like?
Yeah.
And even being able to afford to do that. Like, you don't need to buy the place to go and see what's it actually like and experience it. And I got a bit of a taste for that when house sitting and doing it for free.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, it sort of changed my perception of the whole, like, the goal is to buy a beach house. I'm like, well, I could actually just rent it for a year, for a weekend or whatever, go and taste it.
Yeah, which is what Airbnb is great for, right? So it's access, not ownership, is the trend, right? You know, Lime scooters, Ubers, you know, you can upgrade your Uber even, you know, just you can experience life in so many more democratic ways than having to own it. I think Tony Robbins is sort of the thought leader on that as well. You know, he's saying, well, why own the plane when you just lease it? You know, you still get it, but you don't have the burden of the maintenance. So, you know, what I've noticed and what I love, this was the exciting part for me, was more the social side. I knew we'd be moving into different networks, new social circles, and just getting to know. Every single one of our neighbours has the most incredible story. And when you ask that, when you mention that point about wealth, I would say this is not an investment property for someone in our life stage. It's the perfect investment property that now I live in for who our neighbours are. They're in their 70s, 80s. They've completely achieved and accomplished what they wanted in life. These houses are just parking their capital. They're freehold, they're parking up that capital. The growth on a percentage basis, when you translate that into dollars, when it grows, is phenomenal. You know, 6 figures, 7 figures a year. On a good day, but the cash flow they're getting is still 6 figures, right? There's no, you know, so that's a great asset for them at that stage in their investing cycle.
Well, a lot of, you know, beachfront property and whatnot, as much as the narrative is like climate change and increasing insurances and whatnot, and you've got to be careful, it seems like wealthy people still park their cash in rare assets, like beachfront property, because there's not a lot of it, and wealthy people seem to be drawn to it, and they like something about it. I actually read there's a study, I think, I don't know if it's Massey and Palmy did it, but basically they tested being able to see the water versus being able to see greenery, and it's really beneficial for your mental health.
Totally. Both of them are, right?
But water is more important than land, apparently.
Even more so. Okay, interesting.
I probably butchered that whole study and not explained it perfectly, but that was the outcome that I took from it. Being able to see the water is very good for you.
I mean, every weekend it is a highway of people walking up the beach. You know, it's amazing, and slowly our friends are moving over as well. And people, my friends are texting. Mortgage broker friends like, what are the schools over there? So I know they're doing their DD, they're looking up listings and coming around more than one concern we did have was that by moving away from our core circle, which is more sort of central Auckland, we thought we wouldn't see our friends so much. We have seen them every single weekend. They're jumping straight over, coming over. You know, it's amazing. You know, we can hang out on the beach, run into people all the time. But it's interesting to find out who our neighbours are. They own massive freight companies, huge, you know, different aggregate quarries, a lot of property-related people.
I bet you'll probably make your cost of rent there back via somebody that you'll meet in that area, and you may end up doing business with them or networking with somebody in their network
Absolutely.
that brings income. And it's hard for people to understand, but I mean, we've done numerous podcasts around like getting around money and people doing things and wealth and whatnot, and being in the right sort of areas and neighborhoods and groups of people where shit is happening. If you can add value to those people, often your cost of rent can become cost neutral through people you'll meet or the activity you might end up doing.
Oh, absolutely. So my landlady lives next door, and she's like my father-in-law. She's like the female version of him, this real wheeler dealer. Turns out she used to, she was known in her more active career stage as being like the go-to for revolving credit. When that became a thing, she was like the wizard with it. And so I know everything about what everyone's doing because of her, but also she has already connected to me to several real estate agents, and I know about the transactions around us that are happening that don't even reach the market because she's part of them. People still come to her. Her clients are sort of in their sell down stage, not necessarily the properties that my clients are buying, but being part of that community and seeing how those different parts of the market work is completely opening my eyes. All I need to find is one deal for a client through that introduction, and that's already a huge ROI, but just it's interesting to see how people behave. It's new again for me.
Yeah, exciting. How are you getting on with, surely you've had some like, renting's dead money, like you're wasting money, what are you doing? Or, you've got a $20 million property portfolio. Like, you must be getting a bit of objection or pushback of that, or don't hear any of it?
About, I should own the asset so I can have the capital growth?
Yeah, like, why are you renting? What are you doing renting? Like, you should know better.
I think it throws the idea, right? Honestly. Do you know what I have to say? My husband, so Taylor, it was his idea. He said, I've done the numbers.
Yeah.
I think we need to sell our place and go rent, And I was always thinking, no, we need to hustle and grow the portfolio faster so we can buy in Takapuna.
Yeah.
And then he did the numbers, all these scenarios, and you can't refute the numbers, right? You know that. So I sat there, and even though I was staring at the numbers on this Excel, I couldn't mentally get my head around accepting it. It honestly probably took me the first 5 or 6 months of that 18 months I mentioned.
Yeah.
And then when we started to look, and definitely. My clients were most surprised. And then through Instagram, I could not believe the comments and the, not in a negative way, but just the inquiry. As soon as I said, look, we're looking to go rent,
what?
It was like, what can you teach me? I need to learn. I'm like, oh, well, hey, it's not for everyone. But the numbers worked, and what I was nervous about, because I'm a risk taker, but I'm very calculated with it too, is that I didn't want to have to rely on my active income to pay the rent.
Gotcha.
That would really make me quite uncomfortable. And so I needed to know or assign mentally that this property covers the increase in our costs, which, to be honest with you, isn't a lot more, because where we had our mortgage in Grey Lynn, we're roughly neutral based on the rent we're now getting. And it was really serendipitous and happened so quickly that we haven't sold. So we intended to sell, but the agent we had scouting on Taka for us found us this rental. We moved in, and he did such a great job that we ended up saying, just take care of our place. And within a week, he had that tenanted to some New Zealand execs.
Wow.
And so that's basically cost neutral. So again, coming back to the market being flat in terms of value growth, it costs us basically little, if not nothing, to hold it. Let's get the rent, hold it. When it gets to the price that we're happy with, cool. If in doing so, this would hold us back from continuing to build our portfolio, I would have a different issue or question about that. Because we could release that debt and recycle it into something that could probably perform a lot better, the way my brain works. But we are still acquiring properties despite that. So that's fine. It's not holding us back. And I know that we have one block of units that pays the rent where we are. So for me, that pressure of, I have to hustle, I need to find income, that's where I've mentally, allocated, if you will.
So you're not really paying your rent, somebody else is paying.
Our investments are. Exactly.
And it's like you're way down the path for other people. But the other way I think about things like this is that if you're a builder and you tie all of your tools and lock them in a tool shed, then you're not really a builder, because you can't access your tools. So if you tie up all of your capital in an owner-occupied property, you probably can borrow against it, but it probably reduces or restricts what you could borrow, right?
Yes,
so why would somebody like you go and park all of their tools in a massive place just so that you can be like, yeah, great, I've got it.
Yeah.
When you can actually still use the tools, generate income with them, and get the benefit of using the place, you just don't own it. Like you say, you have access. I think that's a nice terminology, access over ownership.
For sure. I think if you were to, if you're sitting there thinking, well, how does that apply to me? What is the mortgage on your home? There's no income against your home. So let's say, round numbers, that's $1 million mortgage, right? Zero income against it. You could, and the way that my brain works with my Accelerate clients, split that into two. So let's say 2 lots of $500K debt. If I challenged that $1 million in my home, can it be working harder? Can there be a return or cash flow that is better than that? Absolutely, because right now it's zero. So if I cut that in half, that's 2 lots of $500K. For my Accelerate clients, that's 2 roughly $400,000 purchases. That could be New Plymouth, could be Napier, could be Whangarei, could be Wellington.
Harwood? Navy. Sorry, I derailed you.
Plus a renovation allocation, right? Let's say half, less than $500,000 per property. Get that to a positive cash flow by adding bedrooms, etc. 2 of those, that would be bringing in $1,300 to $1,400 a week at the moment, better in a better rental market. But that compared to having $1 million sitting there idle, to me that's night and day. You know. So for me, that's lazy debt.
Well, you've obviously got a lot going on, and you probably could be on the beach at Takapuna. It is coldish. Have you been getting in the water?
I've actually not. Tay goes out every morning.
Really? Nice, good effort. So I guess this sounds exciting, and I'm seeing more DMs about it around, we're thinking about renting out our property and whatnot. People don't seem to say this when there's growth in the property market and interest rates are lower and things are a bit easier. What would you stress as sort of the downsides to doing this, or maybe the things that people may overlook if they want to have a crack at rent vesting? Yeah,
I definitely don't want this to sound really streamlined, because it absolutely was not.
Yeah.
I would have to say the part that really pulled on me the hardest was the prospect and now the actual disruption for our family and the kids. So I have one primary school aged daughter and one preschool. And the prospect of them moving schools, I knew that they'd be extremely upset. So we've gone right through that. And of course, you're doing all the research, making sure you find the best schools and opportunities for them. It's still a risk. And so all of that on top of maintaining a business, growing a business, hiring new staff that started 2 days after we moved into that house, so many things on top of each other. I was stressed out of my mind. That just sometimes you have these seasons, right? Emotionally being able to support the kids through their stress. When I was feeling at the top of mine, there's some real challenges with that. So I would almost say it's the non-monetary part of it. I can calculate and work all that out. But actually managing the family, I think it's the disruption to the old life. But in the pursuit of upgrading it, knowing it's for the better, it's you push through. The other thing about being a tenant is, the unknown of, I guess there's 2 different scenarios. We're very lucky. We live next door to our landlords, and they, as I sort of mentioned, they're adding value to us, and we're getting on so well. I think if our landlords were absent, it would be different again. So not know if they didn't live there, would I know what's going on in their life? Would I know if there's potential they might decide to sell this place, from under us? I think that's a real concern for a lot of tenants, and I totally empathise. So I think it's not for everyone, right? Depends on what works for you.
To just add in a few things that I'd thought about people in terms of their objections, like stability and security is what I see pop up all the time. Okay. But then interestingly, I see people be like, we're taking our kids out of school and we're going to go live around the world for 6 months. And so I'm like, why are we so adaptable when it's our choice? But when it's not, then we're like, oh, what if the landlord sells the house, etc. But I think you can shape things as a journey or an exciting venture for kids, and I feel like they're more adaptable than what we give them credit for. However, I don't even have kids and I'm not a parent, so I shouldn't be. But I just think about my life, the amount of places I've lived and stuff, and bounce back, and I wonder if society sold us this big, the landlord might kick you out. It's like, really? I might have to fucking move somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like, but yes, I get it, schools and stuff like that. But
yeah, I think you're right. So mentally preparing is the first thing, and actually that can be the toughest, as it was for me. Just getting my head around, I'm looking at these numbers, I'm not believing these numbers that are black and white. So I think mentally getting yourself into the right headspace for that next transition is the first thing, right? Things manifest twice, first in your head and then second in reality. One thing that actually is really interesting, so a friend of mine, CB, who started Orcon, he referenced a study the other day about significant change helps you create more core memories. And that was really interesting. So, if the kids didn't, I don't know if this is trying to reduce our guilt or what, but, if everything kept on as it were, there are a few reference points to form new memories, and actually this change is a catalyst for growth. And I have to say we're seeing it in both the kids already, especially our 4-year-old who his numeracy and all those kind of hard learning skills have completely blossomed since we moved. It's kind of like their brains have been triggered into a new stage, so it's really fascinating.
Wow.
And it's excitement, right? So we are creating new adventures.
And again, it's a non-financial benefit that you couldn't see before doing it, right? So I think our brains are very good at looking at all the risks and what could go wrong. The other thing I thought people would say, but I want to use my KiwiSaver for my first home, so then I'm not going to be able to access that to then start their property investing journey. And we don't need to answer that right now, but I'd imagine that'll be one of the objections. And then maybe it's you need to live in that for 6 months to start with, and
Yes, exactly. So it might be timing and just mapping out the long term. So, this is not to say have some knee-jerk reaction to listening here and think, oh, I need to quickly pivot, do that. That's definitely not the case, right? No. You need to map out that long-term goal. It's actually starting with your end goal and then working out what that means in practice. This is the first step towards many that ultimately get you to where you want. So this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all, but and absolutely KiwiSaver is the best thing that's happened to this country to get Kiwis in charge of their savings to invest, right? Yes. Own home or otherwise. So it has to be appropriate and at the right time.
Yeah. The other one, complicated and risky, well, that's life. So is not doing anything. My parents said that I should buy a house. And then that societal pressure of like, don't rent, invest, as we talked about, like renting being a dead money, sacrifice too much, have somebody else in my house and move and what that's going to cost us money to move. Yep. I think it's one of those things where you've got to do the numbers, but you've actually got to want to do it, and you've got to, maybe even use ChatGPT or speak to somebody who has rent vested and it didn't work out versus somebody who rent vested and it did work out. But then I reckon the main thing that cooks people with all of this stuff is going back to what you said before. People don't actually know what the end is, so therefore it's hard to make decisions anyway. But then people love in this country being hindsight Harry, where it's like they'll go and do something and then maybe your landlord does sell it a month after and they go, oh, well, see how it worked out for her. Well, how are you to know that they died a month later and that the will said sell the house or whatever? But what do you do? You move back to where you were, or you find the next place or whatever, and we adapt. But
find a way to make it work, right? You can only control what you can control, and then you have to be adaptable, which is probably what this is good at as an active lesson. But I think, planning ahead is, you need to have a plan. I've always had the goal to have passive income and to help my parents. So coming right back to the beginning, the goal was to be able to support my parents. That was where I'd always been in my brain. Didn't get to with my mum. She passed away. We just had actually her 10-year anniversary
of her passing.
And it felt the right thing to do, and it felt so good that I could be in a place where I took my brother and my dad back for this trip, and provide that for them, so we could go back to Malaysia and connect and be with my grandparents and the wider family. That to me is just the ultimate, right? It's if I didn't invest, I didn't have these rental incomes, I couldn't have done that, and that was so important for me. Yeah.
And I think that's a good example of finding what money means to each of us and what's valuable. That sounds obviously incredibly valuable to you. Yeah. And that's what I think people don't spend the time working through. Okay, what is it that I'm working hard for or putting money aside for? And spending some time in that is very important. The final thing that I didn't say earlier, but that I saw this saying, and it's, what you own owns you. And I think it's so important to remember, whether it's rental properties or whether it's your own home, and we like the fact that we own this stuff or maybe even shares or whatever, but it still owns us in some way. There might be repairs, or we can't do this because we're fully leveraged into this. Yeah. And we have to accept that when we own things, then they own us in return to a degree.
Yeah, the good with the bad. It's not all good. And there are seasons with that, right? So I would say one of the biggest stresses for landlords right now is vacancy periods. So if there's one thing I would say to you is hang on in there and separate this from the long-term benefits. You know, don't make a knee-jerk reaction and think you've done the wrong thing or think you need to sell. These are the moments in your investing career you have to push through, because then the benefit will come. It's leaving now under this difficult situation that does win and owns you. Find a solution and hold on, because long-term wise, you know that you're going to get so much more than the stress of this minute. But appreciate it's very difficult when you're right in there.
Ilse Wolfe from Wolfe Property Coaching, how can people find you and keep an eye on your journey, your rent vesting, and what some of your clients are up to?
Yeah, Wolfe Property Coaching on Instagram and Facebook. But you can contact me through my website. Love to have a chat anytime. Always happy to share a story. And especially with rent vesting and our personal journey, there has been a lot of interest. So I'm popping those on the story, so keep an eye out.
Well, keep an eye out for Elsa on the Takapuna Beach as well. She's strolling down there in that $13 million property. I'm coming around for a look. I want to see what a $13 million beachfront property looks like.
Welcome. Come and do it.